everyone. Welcome to Hakan Elbir'le Diyaloglar. Today is so special for me. For the first time, we are recording from London at the University of East London Docklands campus at the Royal Docks Sustainability Centre. Today, my special guest is the director of RDCS, Robert De Jong'u. We'll be talking about cities, diversity, sustainability, and how spaces can bring very different people together. Welcome, Rob. Thank you very much for joining us. Rob, before we talk about RDCS, I'd love to start with you. What originally drew you to work with cities, communities, and sustainability?
Good question. So it's probably from when I was young, a real passion for being in the environment and also being around people. And that grew over years where I then learnt about environmental sustainability, but realized it's all about people. And that connection with people then brings it into place. And then when I came to London, I began to work in the built environment more strongly. Like previously, I was working with businesses and their sustainability journey, as well as conservation in the natural world. But this brought me into the built environment where you realize that how we build and create places is how we then enable people to connect. If we then have isolated blocks or the landscape doesn't quite shape right, we have a really important role to plan that in so those serendipitous opportunities happen, but also the connections between people. And hence sustainability is so important to that, because if we don't connect, we don't learn from each other. And we need to create spaces where we can continually learn it and create thriving communities.
Correct. So before RDCS, was there a moment that made you think differently about how spaces could bring very different people together?
I've always been interested in spaces. It's something that I've explored through art and various cultural experiences as well, having traveled in many places. But then I've learned a lot more recently when you look at the lens from different perspectives. And one of the earlier pieces of work that I did was around aged people and thinking, how do we provide an urban environment that is relevant for older people? And with that focus, you then had an opportunity to look at, well, actually those challenges they face as older people is also relevant for younger people. It's also relevant for people who have disabilities. Because a simple thing like a bench, you think, oh, well, why do we need a bench here? Well, actually that brings communities together. But also allows a resting place for somebody, but it allows a connection point for someone else. So it's that rethinking of things with different lenses, which then allows a more inclusive approach and questions to be asked.
I see. So how did you end up RDCS? And for instance, for someone who has never heard of RDCS, how would you describe it? But obviously not as a building, but as a purpose.
So I was previously working in the startup space, really still passionate and still are around how do we unlock opportunities to drive innovation in place. I worked, as I mentioned before, in the built environment. So I worked for an organization called the Urban Land Institute. And through that, I traveled to different cities across Europe and met with developers, investors, architects, designers, and really opened my eyes about, well, who's actually making the decisions of these cities? Is it policy? Is it the actual supply chain? And always with this focus on sustainability. And then over the years, I learned more about that and was advising or guiding and supporting people in that space to really come together. But then the opportunity came up with a role to do that in place. And that was here at the University of East London, where we're creating an innovation hub that brings people together in the campus of the the campus at Docklands at UEL, to really connect research with community and industry, but also teaching. So there's real life skills, and industry can lean in and community can lean in, but we can also lean out. But there's a wider alignment. This area of East London is going through a major regeneration. Thousands of homes coming, new jobs, and in the next 5 to 10 years, this place will transform, and already is. And with that, we have the opportunity to be a stakeholder in that. And we already are. For the first 3 years of this centre, we've seen a growing engagement around the innovation that we're leading, the entrepreneurs. It's also then the inclusive aspects, which you bring a lot to as well through the Dialogue Café. And then also the research that we have, which is more people with profound disabilities. Bringing that research and entrepreneur spirit we want to create connections and develop the skills of the future. So what are the solutions that we can create together in place that will actually grow in the Royal Docks, will grow in East London and then possibly deploy across London and more widely, but we also become a skills hub and a learning environment for that.
So I think there is a specific reason to invest in East London. When I look at policy, mainly the Mayor of London and GLA, I mean, it's been a year I've been here, mainly in East London. So do you agree that, you know, the city is now expanding to the east? And as you described, RDCS is based in the university campus, but it doesn't feel like a traditional academic space. So was that intentionally from the beginning?
So,
I mean, being in a uni campus, but beyond academic approach.
Very much so. So the whole purpose of this centre is to bring new ways of thinking, have an outward-facing space, but then also program that with the right people and alignment. So East London is going through major regeneration now. It's not just here in Newham, it's more broadly as well. But the Royal Docks in particular has a huge growth focus. It's also an economic zone, so there's new businesses that'll be moving in at scale. And we have an opportunity to look at that differently. It's not just buildings coming forward. It's not just a community which is isolated, but it's actually a community which is integrated. And that's where we have a real civic engagement. And as a university, we're really proud of what we strive in that to be really inclusive. We support a lot of people from the local community into skills, and we're looking at broadening that and growing that. So we've already got strong partnerships with industry, but where do we potentially have opportunities to grow as East London becomes such a focus? But also recognising this was a wharf area. So previously it was ships coming out of here with cargo, and now we're in a phase where new industries are moving in, and that creates a new excitement. But we need to make it inclusive, and hence the role of the centre to be that connector in the space, to showcase the art of the possible and run programs such as the Sustainable Cities Festival, where you can rethink things and bring the community and industry together.
So the demographic profile, I think, has been also changed in line with those changes. Do you think that it's a good thing, or is there any humanitarian aspect?
There's a really strong humanitarian aspect to it. Like I have talked a lot about the built environment, but it's all about people. Like if we are striving to create skills of the future, we're obviously as a university, we have deep academic research and as well as skills expertise. How do we align that more with industry? And as a university, we're very focused on jobs and real world outcomes. So we're striving to have a closer relationship, but that's also not just with a few people, it's actually with the industries. So we meet the needs of the future where the skills that we're developing today apply to real outcomes, not just for that person learning in that environment or the researcher, but has applied outcomes and impact.
So that brings me to this question actually. What problem does RDCS exist to solve that universities or cities often struggle to address on their own? Address and also solve.
There's a multitude. So as a physical space, we provide that connector, but we're trying to really solve how we can support entrepreneurs to grow successfully, not just as a business, but as a civic organization, create more awareness around the sustainability of that across both the environmental, social and governance and wider economic impact, create local employment, but also create awareness and engagement in research as well as activities where people can collaborate effectively around humanitarian activities, and then bring in the entrepreneur spirit to that, which then allows things to grow together. So where research may often happen in isolation in academia, as in a lab or in a classroom area, this is an area where it connects, and it connects very much into place.
So considering the London universities, any similar center do you, let's say, recognize?
There are a few centres around London and Europe. So we're part of the European Business Innovation Network, EBN, and they have similar centres, but they're very much focused on different entities, I would say, where the specialties of manufacturing, for example, or energy districts or tech, for example, or bioscience. We connect into multiple areas. So we have fashion and creative industries here. We have computing, we have architecture, we have design, and then it also links into the health aspects and health campus at UEL. And layering on that, we also have a growing area of AI and digital. But with that, we're bringing it into place and realizing how can we as a campus also be a test bed. So this building is not just representative of what happens in isolation and research, but actually what's happening across campus. How do we evolve that? How do we make our place and this beautiful campus that we have more accessible, and evolve that with partners have the like vested interest in it aligned?
I would describe this center as a lived learning space in a broader sense.
Yep.
So as you may remember, I kindly asked you to bring a book.
Yep.
Did you bring one?
I have.
And
yeah.
Which one?
It's actually this one here.
Yeah. Why did you choose this?
It is Drawing on the Right Side of the Rain.
Okay, drawing.
Yeah.
Could you please open it random a page and read aloud a sentence or short passage that feels meaningful to you?
Okay. Picked a lovely random page here. Worldwide culture and historic terms of prejudice. Terms and connotations of good for the right hand, left hemisphere, and connotations of bad for the left or right hemisphere appear in most languages around the world. The Latin word for left is sinister, meaning ominous or treacherous. The Latin word for right is dexter, from which comes our word dexterity, meaning skill, or I'm going to have to test that word, adroitness. I haven't heard that before. And the French word for left, remember that left hand is controlled by the right hemisphere, excuse my French accent, gauche, meaning awkward, naive, or ill-mannered, from which comes our word gawky.
Wow.
So
I mean, how this passage or sentence resonate to you, and what would you like to talk about it?
So we'll bring it back to the book itself, and I have a real passion for art and creativity, and it's always nice to explore different perspectives, hence what I've shared earlier around seeing the built environment, seeing the way we work, our practices. We all need to learn, but this also highlights how we use language, where language is connected back to where historical elements or different dialects and what their purpose is in that, and how English in particular brings that together in their own way. So the English language is a dynamic one, but this is more around how the brain can be trained in different ways and our awareness can be unlocked. Because I often see art as one of those lovely release elements that where if you're spending time doing drawing, painting, performance art, or you're in a different environment mentally and physically. And it's the same when we create spaces that are diverse and inclusive, they should also be representative of people with different perspectives. And it's how do we look at that lens and spend time doing that? Because we often get into the detail, I'm just on my train of thought, that's all I do. But actually, we can all do something different. Not saying we all have to change, but we can also experience things differently. And that's where I find that passage as well, addressing some of those questions, but then also I'm inspired to read and learn about that from a new perspective, from somebody else, because there's lots of authors out there, but it's a new perspective. Hence
exactly, like thinking out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I'm going to take this book to our, let's say, bookshelves in Istanbul.
Very good.
Yeah, it's a good, let's say, present.
Yeah.
Thank you. So at RDCS, as you described and as I observed, very different groups actually come together, like researchers, entrepreneurs, tech people, students, obviously local residents, organizations. So what's the hardest part of turning those encounters into something meaningful?
Good question. So to make it meaningful, it's leading with purpose, and it's how we communicate and how we also actively engage. Because as you can imagine, like a large organization, you have many different strands and abilities. And the challenge is, where do you bring them together on the same path? And not everybody is on the same path all the time, and we shouldn't be, because the world is diverse and it should always be diverse in many ways, because then it'll make it sustainable. So what we're doing here is really programming that in, and it takes time to embed. We can't expect it to be full from day one. It takes time to build that community, and that's what we're doing here. In the year that you've been here, we've seen a real growth in the hub of the centre being active with the cafe and the engagement with the Dialogue Café that's really brought life to this place. But it also allows for people to spend and experience the space in a different way. But we're also programming that in with regular skills sessions, entrepreneur growth. The incubator hub we have in Teradoc upstairs allows entrepreneurs to be here for longer and develop their businesses into East London and beyond, but also have the support of academia and the services of students and the wider growth activities in London. So it's a really unique platform. And then how do we lay that with social outcomes in parallel? So the awareness of social outcomes of how people take on talent, how people develop their skills, but also think of their businesses as well as society in a more inclusive way. Hence, we're working with yourself and others to make this a hub of innovation around social inclusion, sustainability and tech, but also the skills of the future.
Exactly. So do you agree that learning can genuinely happen outside classrooms through informal, everyday encounters and engagement?
Absolutely. We're all in learning, all living in a learning environment. We might be mentally believing we don't, but we're all, every day is a learning opportunity. Every moment is a learning opportunity. And this place obviously represents many of that because we're in a university, but actually if this place was in the middle of London, it'd be completely different because it has a different community, has a different ecosystem. But here we're bringing those learning environments together where others can see how things can work differently. And that's what always excites me when you go to places that are slightly more creative, that are loosely structured around core themes, such as what we have here, and you're creating environments where people then learn and step into that without forcing it, saying, okay, you're on that learning trajectory. So learning is definitely a core part of everything and every day.
So yeah, I mean, at Dialogue Hub, we are always using the quotation from Martin Buber. It says, the only way to learn is through encounter. Yeah. And that's true.
It is true to an extent, but you also need to have time to digest and learn how to mentally take that on. Because an encounter that you're doing in a treadmill, you will learn it, but you will lose it. Yeah. So by encountering, you then physically embed it as well a little bit more, but also goes a little bit deeper. It's like reading a book and then 3 days later, I don't know what was in that. Or watching a movie and say, that was really entertaining, but I don't know the characters, I don't know where that was. And I think it's creating environments where you continually deepen that. It allows for really vibrant learning.
I agree. So let's talk about a bit Dialogue Café. So Dialogue Café has been operating in this building for the last 1 year. From your perspective, why was it important for a deaf-led social enterprise to be part of this center? Why did you choose Dialogue Café?
So from the moment I came here, it was around creating a hub that was inclusive and really represented sustainability. So when we set out to find a new cafe provider, there was a very standard procurement discussion around coffee and food. And then when I spoke to the procurement team and others, we said, well, we've got an opportunity to do something different. Why not put out a tender that asks to the community and interested people for what could a sustainable cafe look like? And fortuitously, you came across this tender and put a submission in. And it was by far the best, where it offered not just looking at sustainability in the food and supply, but also employment pathways. And as a university, we're really strong about employment pathways and outcomes in society. And with that, it really aligned to our interests. But then supporting people who are deaf and hard of hearing was another added value where it went beyond that. It went into inclusive elements of people who have diverse backgrounds. And ultimately, we're connected to people with diverse backgrounds. Many of us have and know people from different cultures, different disabilities, or abilities, I should say. And by creating that in the center, it's created a new ethos to this place that goes beyond the food and drink supply, but also has an interaction with the your lovely team. Like, they're an amazing team who bring life to this place in a different way and also connect back to our research and the purpose of the centre to be civic.
So in this context, what does Dialogue Café add to RDCS that a conventional, regular cafe simply couldn't?
It's being socially conscious and your social enterprise, which therefore means that the purpose of your business allows us to proudly represent but also support civic engagement. And with that, it really brings a purpose and heart to the centre. So if we had a standard cafe here, people, it could be busy, but it could have a standard brand, but actually it brings an artisan element to it. It's your supply chain that's also relevant to that. It's your team and how that works with us and the wider community that we're building here. And I can see that through the rapport I have with certain staff. I observe them as well, interacting with your colleagues and team in different ways. And people are not just here for a job. They're here to be part of a community. And that passion then resonates with the purpose and being part of this, rather than saying, great, I've got my coffee, I've got my food, goodbye. But also the experience you're layering with the digital elements, where we are breaking down barriers through technology and learning in that space. So it's going beyond the transaction. It's into personal as well as societal impact that you're creating.
Definitely. So that's why actually I've been thinking the definition of ability and disability must be revised. I mean, to whom, call this person able or that one is disabled. So I've been with, disabled people for a very long time, and I've been discussing with them as well, like, with blind people or deaf people. And sometimes people, as a matter of courtesy, call a blind person visually impaired. But they insist, I'm a blind person, call me a blind.
Okay.
It's not a bad thing.
Yep.
So it's all about actually our stereotypes, our prejudice. Yep. So any moment you remember to encounter with any disabled person in your life, and then what was your reaction?
From a young age, I've engaged with people with different abilities. Even at school, one of the core elements of what you had to do at school was do a work experience, but then the other one was social work. So you had two different experiences. And that week I chose to go work at a disabled institute, and that brought me into a community. Yes, it was isolated and in its own kind of centre, but it did open my eyes that disability is a strange word, because I find that we all have different abilities, and that as a result of them or us being different, it's not a diss. Personally, I would say. I think it's more a lens on different abilities, that they have other strengths as a result, and we have other strengths. And I'm always open to interpreting that, but also trying to be careful that we don't disengage, because it is those assumptions, great, you're disabled and you're able. Well, actually, no. It's then race and culture comes into play, and it becomes a whole messy thing. But for me, it's around learning and engaging. And throughout my life, I've engaged in different people. My son's neurodiverse himself, and I've got friends who've got certain aspects to that as well. So it connects with us in meaningful ways.
Exactly.
And it's sometimes we see that also going back to the discussion around the urban environment and learning about older people. Well, it also learned about people with different abilities and accessibility, and that lens also was opened up through that kind of work. And I think we all should have time throughout the year and days when we think about different people.
I totally agree. So now, remember, we have a corporate workshop program called Managing the Silence, and we have a word set. So I'd like to ask you to pick 3 cards from here. Let me show you. Yeah, randomly, please pick 3 cards. Okay. Don't look.
No.
Thank you. So, and open the first card, please, and read the word out loud and tell us what that word means to you.
Impatient. I've heard that often.
in our 21st century, everyone, right?
We're all in a fast-paced environment now, but it's also wanting results quickly, and also being focused is the opposite of that.
To some extent, it may work, but what do you think? There must be a balance, right?
Yeah, definitely with that. Impatient is when you're aware of what you want, but you may not be aware of what others want or need at that time. But it also then, if you think of many different scenarios, this throws up lots of questions around, is it good to be impatient? Is it, and sometimes it is because you need to get something done, but other times should we be more balanced? And I think that's what throws up for me is like that, maybe the word patient rather than the im.
Yeah. So let's do the same for the other words.
Mm-hmm. I've got the same word.
Really? So that's okay. It must be a reason, but anyway.
Yeah. I won't look into that too much. Being doubly impatient. The second one is hopeful. So in terms of meaning for that, like for me, immediately it comes to mind that how can we create and be in a world where hope is not just individual, but is broader than that? Because there's personal hope, but there's also, if we're consciously aware of others and the way we work or the way we behave in society, it makes a world that's more inclusive. So, but then, yeah, and I like it if we could break that down as hope and full, we could make a world full of hope for people.
So because, nowadays especially, there are two types of people. One is hopeful still. They believe there is a hope, considering the environment we are living in, and politics and so on. But other part is, they lost their hope. So which side are you in?
I'm the optimist.
Okay.
Not an eternal optimist, but a realist in some ways. But because we live in a world where there's lots of pressure culturally, financially, environmentally, or climate and society, I have seen and experienced different ways of that. That yes, we can have struggles, but as a human, as an individual, as society, we do get through that. And we do need to see things in time and put different perspectives. And it's the same as being inclusive, where if we can take the time to give that bit of hope to somebody else or allow for hopeful environments to be created, it creates purpose for others, and it might unlock other things that we may not be aware of. So I'm not blindly optimistic, but I am hopeful, and that cycles will come back. And yes, environmentally, we're in a very challenging time, financially as well, as more pressures come on. But I think there's a shift in that. And we may not know the answer now, but if we have a vested interest in society and nature and the planet, we will get through this. But we need to bring others on that journey, hence having an open environment that's inclusive, but approaches such as yours, that we bring organizations like that to the fore. We can't just say, great, you're a great small organization, but if you don't grow, you won't be successful, and impact will only remain small. We need to turn that around and say, well, you've got the opportunity to scale and bring more people and benefits. And we've had lots of conversations around what this means for the deaf community. You're a really important part of that. And I think we should really look at how do we scale this place as a learning environment and a blueprint for other universities, but not just universities, centers and buildings and place can play a role in being inclusive.
I wouldn't agree more. So the last word?
Happy. Well, it fits with the optimist. So, yeah, happy, again, it comes down to being positive around what we can do. And yeah, moments of sadness are also important because, we live in a world and different societies and different clashes that affect us personally or in other ways. And we can't eternally be happy, but if we have we strive to make things happy, not just from a human perspective. I think we often think of it from a human perspective, but actually if we create an environment where animals can live happily, and things that we can't see also live happily, and that then happiness is broader than just that individual experience. It actually sits deeper. And that also comes back to how you're running your business. I see the joy in your staff. They come here with purpose, and they come here with passion, and they want to be part of this community. So it's important for us to create happiness that goes beyond just a job, and it goes back into the society as well.
I mean, I was going to tell you the same thing, actually. Purpose and happiness are together, actually. So we always say we are a purpose-driven organization.
Yeah.
And plus we prioritize happiness.
Yeah.
Because if our members are not happy, there must be a problem.
Yeah. But also where you're not doing that alone, because we're often thinking of happiness as a kind of moment or struggle, but actually if you open up and talk about those and create environments where those opportunities can happen, like if you were in a cafe in a small high street and just had people walking past, the creation of happiness is very different to what we have here in the centre, because it's an open place. There's people naturally flowing past, but you connect with the entrepreneurs, you connect with the research, you connect with the local community, and that happiness then spreads in a different way. And I think we need to think of things that way, where the struggles of sadness also have a lens to create happiness.
Yeah.
The yin and yang in life.
Absolutely right. So thank you very much for the amazing interpretations of the words. When we get back to questions, can something as ordinary as ordering a coffee really change how people think about inclusion and accessibility?
It does, absolutely. Because, and I think it comes down to the ethos of why we create inclusive spaces or activities. So what we have here, instead of just having a cafe where people come along and order, you've got tech to support that. But I've also observed people have a hesitancy. It's like, I'm not sure if I can order that. I don't know if I can learn the sign language. But you've broken that down in very simple terms. And that moment of people trying opens up their mind and creates that inclusive outcome straight away. So what is thought of as a challenge is actually personally an achievement. And it's a little step. But again, it comes back to that path, I think, where we have a shared path to make things inclusive, but in different ways. And I've noticed that here in the cafe, where people then get more passionate about the purpose of it, and they're aware of the purpose behind it.
Exactly. I mean, to be honest, instead of talking about diversity inclusion, one of the best ways is to invite people like us to engage and experience it.
Yeah.
So that's what we are, using this. It's called experiential learning model.
But also in a way that is very open. Like you're not setting a course and you have to be here Monday at 3:00 and you'll do this for an hour and then you'll go away and you forget about it. But here you can touch it. And then you learn as you're, like you said, it's very much experiential, but it's in place.
Yeah.
And it's every day, it's part, which then makes it, you think, how do I communicate every day? How do I engage with people with different abilities or different thoughts and different lenses? And that's always interesting for people to bring their kind of perspective to that, but not force that in a kind of fixed way. Because every day people need food, they need water. And if they're here, well, there's a great cafe, why not come and experience that? And then that opens up their mind in different ways as well.
So sustainability is often framed around carbon, energy, or climate. How central is social sustainability, inclusion, accessibility, dignity to RDCS's work?
It's one of our core pillars. So yes, we have really strong environmental, carbon and place-based sustainability, but then underlying that, one of our other pillars is the civic engagement and civic impact. So as a building, we've got open floors and they've been designed specially for that. So they're accessible for people with different abilities. And then also the way we run our programs, we make sure that they're open to not just a set group, but actually the wider community as well. and we have special outreach areas that we're growing to build stronger links to areas of need and support. But then we also look at civic engagement through our practice-based centres. So we have services that our students have developed that can then offer free services back to society. And we measure those outcomes as well. Like, how often do we support local businesses to grow? How often do we support local communities to host programs or events here and skills workshops? And how do we then, as a civic institution, create betterment in our local community? And then also look at that from a lens of abilities, where we have the Rix Institute doing their inclusive research with people with profound disabilities, which allows us to look at people who may not be part of normal society, but then have an inroad into that. But they're here in the same building. They're also doing work with other places around the world. And similar to yourself, you're working in Istanbul, you're working here in London. It's a really vibrant city. Now, what footprint could we have on that? Could we really reshape that? And inclusivity is core to all of that. And then also the entrepreneurs that we're bringing through.
Yeah.
We have a number of them focused on social entrepreneur and health or wider society outcomes. And we're building that community, and I can see that really being a hub for us to learn in new ways.
True. So if we are talking about in everyday life encounters, my question is, if RDCS is successful, what will feel different in this area 10 years from now? Not on paper, but in everyday life.
So, I mean, we're already having some early successes, and I think it's embedded in is how we embed in the local community and local industries and business, where we're beginning to see a really strong alignment with the local community, where that interest in sustainability is core already here. There's some excellent organizations that we're working with who have a vested interest in growing that community value, and not just a value from a financial point of view, but also from a connection point of view and a purpose-driven outcome, with a lens back onto how this built environment and regeneration that's going on here at the Royal Docks is for them and us more widely. So for us to be successful, we want to influence that and play a role as the skills driver, as the innovation driver, but also the social outcomes driver. But we're not the only one. We're doing that in partnership already with, there's a Royal Docks network where the sustainability leads all come together to learn from each other and share best practice. And we're looking at new ways of supporting that. But underlying that, there's also a just transition at Newham. There's a really strong element within the London Growth Plan around inclusive growth. And all of that ties into how we work together. And for us to be a key driver in that, we're not just putting out one engineer or a group of engineers out into the world. We're bringing out people who are aware of what their skills and development impacts, and as well as research and innovation that's coming forward that shapes for a future world. And that then brings in that social element and the value as well. So for success 10 years down the track, this building is already beginning to be thriving. It is early days, but in 10 years' time, this building will be thriving. It will have many programs running through it and organizations really leaning in to be strong partners to that. But it's also a test bed where you can come and experience it, you lean in and learn while you're here and get value from being a core partner. And that's the key driver for us now to grow that.
So do you think that this model will be replicated in the upcoming years in different environments, not only in the uni campuses, but also in different institutions and even, government bodies?
It could have a policy and government influence, and I'd hope so, definitely. But I would really hope that as the centre is such a connector in that space, and I think other spaces already have elements of that, it's how the ethos of the programs and activities facilitate that collaboration. And hence, one of our core mottos around the centre is how do we drive co-creation and collaboration in a really inclusive way, but then striving to create sustainable cities. So what are sustainable cities and what does that mean to people? And I think what I'm seeing in other centres, there are a couple of other ones out there, notably one in Cambridge as well, that focus on real deep sustainability outcomes but also the ethos of how their policy and structures are set up will have an influence on place. And we will see that here across campus as well, of how we might be able to expand the test bed beyond the walls of what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, when someone walks into RDCS and Dialogue Café for the first time, what do you hope they take away when they leave?
Mm-hmm. So I think the main thing I would want them to walk away with is that there is a future that is sustainable and that they can play a role in being part of that. Because of the various aspects of what we do in sustainability, whether that's a business becoming more sustainable or a initiative which is looking at materials, or another one such as yourselves which is looking at social outcomes, they become more aware, and when they walk away, whether they're here for a day, here for a year, they're leaving with a better purpose. Not that they didn't have a purpose, but they've strengthened their purpose, and they're also inspired that this can be possible. And we already have lots of people walking away with that early experience, and I think it's those that then feel like there's a partnership and there's a community that they can feel part of.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have more, let's say, participants,
Mm-hmm.
not only customers, but also who might be interested in collaborating with us in different aspects.
Yeah.
And then we'll hopefully scale up the project and increase the impact.
Yeah, and I think core to that is having corporates and industry lean in. And we've got early indications that there's interest there, but we need to do that as a group, where industries and companies have their HR agenda to be inclusive. Well, here's a place where you could learn, but you can also support. So it's very light touch almost, that where they can come and experience your courses and Dialogue in the Dark, for example. And if they were to do that for a day or a few hours, that learning experience for them would be hugely impactful to their experience as a team, which then would influence how their company and practices work.
Exactly.
And there's a real opportunity for us to be a driver in that space a lot more, where companies can come to us and learn how to shape sustainability, but also come to us with their challenges. Because sustainability is not about a number of people doing this great and the rest all follow. This is about all of us leaning in to shape the future of the world. And we're already doing that. We do that naturally anyway, but we can be at risk of leaving those behind, those that maybe have different abilities, those that are not aware, or those that are not connected to our communities. So it's very much about creating an inclusive outcome.
And it's a transformative, learning way, actually, as an institution, as a organization.
Yeah, very much. It's a mindset and behavior as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you, Rob, for this thoughtful and honest conversation. Today we speak about cities, communities, organizations, sustainability, diversity. So it's very, in a way, the conversation was thought-provoking, and I'm hoping our audience will benefit from this conversation, and hopefully, if we at least make those people think about it a bit, about our life, the way of thinking in terms of sustainability point of view, diversity, inclusion, we made it.
Yeah.
So thanks again.
You're very welcome.
And see you in another dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you.